What's going on, my super fam? So today we're going to be having a video dedicated to our lovely Wanderer, or whichever name you have given to him, which is still pretty actually interesting because I believe he's going to be the only character in the game aside from the main MC that you can actually rename him in the game. But either way, today we'll look into whether or not Wanderer is still pretty much a worth it character for you to be investing in, since I know that there are a lot of Wanderers fans out there and you guys have been saving up for quite some time now since his very first banner, and that's something we'll be looking to today. Now again guys, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, as there will be a lot of giveaway being held on the channel, which is a huge chance for you to grab a lot of primo gems and save up for your future pools. Really appreciate and love you guys, and with that, let us dive into today's video. So first we'll dive into basically his pros and cons, or I usually just call it some of the most important note you want to keep in mind when you are using Wanderer, so that you guys have an in-depth idea of what you're getting yourself into as a character, which is gonna be Wanderer's playstyle. Now in terms of Wanderer's upside guys, for me personally, even though I'm not a Wanderer's main, he is one of my most favorite DPS character purely in terms of his gameplay, because I would say that it's quite unique guys. You haven't got any kind of character that can actually fly and then do sick wind sickles attack in the air, so he's really got some cool animation going on for him. He is a catalyst user, so usually we can expect him to do decently long range damage. However, if you did notice, then different catalyst character do have kind of like a limit to their range, some being absolutely short like melee character, which is kind of like Klee, but others can have their normal attack shooting range pretty long, and in Wanderer's case I feel that he is one of the longest range catalyst user, and it is very comfortable to hitting enemies with him on the team. Now the thing about Wanderer is that he's more geared towards single targeted performance, and that's still good of its own because he can do really high number, even though Anemo doesn't really have good reaction of its own, but Wanderer is still able to do a decently good job at that. Now Wanderer's gameplay is quite unique in that it revolves around you using his E skill, and that allows him to enter mid-air and enter what's called a wind favored state, and gives him Kugoryoku points, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is kind of like a separate stamina bars guys, and allows Wanderer's normal and charge attack to have kind of like a power up. Now you will be using this point whenever you are dashing or while you're raising your altitude, so generally in order for you to keep him in his E skill state as long as you can, is that you want to limit your dash as much as possible, and obviously you're most of the time not going to be raising your altitude, hence generally why Wanderer would love to have a shield on him. What's more interesting about Wanderer is that he's got access to his Ascension 1 passive, which is basically whenever you cast your E skill and it comes in contact with either Hydro, Pyro, Cryo or Electro, there will be a certain buff that is given to him, and you can get up to 2 of this buff. For Hydro, you will get an extra 20 point increase to your Kugoryoku points. Pyro will increase your attack by 30%, Cryo will be crit rate increased by 20%, and for Electro it will be 0.8 energy restored whenever normal and charge attack connects. Now controlling this buff on Wanderer can be difficult sometimes, so you don't really generally have to be afraid too much in terms of which character you put onto Wanderer's team, just basically puts the best one on him, since generally speaking guys, the buff all performs within about 5 and 10% of each other. Pyro and Cryo would clearly be the best for you, but of course many of the time this would just be there for you to be aware of, and you don't really need to care too much whenever you're within the gameplay. Other than that, the good thing about Wanderer too is that he do have access to quite a lot of team building, unlike some of the other hyper carries in the game that can only perform best in 1 to 2 limited teams. So overall that's gonna be his pros. Now let's quickly have a look into some of his downside. Is that the main thing about Wanderer or many of the hyper carry is that Wanderer same is extremely vulnerable to knockback and interruption, therefore you would love to have a shield when you're playing him, otherwise you will be dashing a lot and therefore consuming your points in your E skill. Now even though he's an Anemo character, he has absolutely no access to crowd control, even though most of his skills are mainly single target target, but his burst guys does have decent AoE, therefore you always want to have a bit of crowd control whenever you are using Wanderer. And speaking about crowd control, he does have one of the best anemo support alongside with him, which is gonna be Farazan. However, there's a weakness in terms of that, is that he is decently reliant on having a C6 Farazan, because C6 Farazan is really quite important to him, and I'll be explaining more of that in details in the later section of this video. And then also, since he is an anemo character, and as we know, anemo doesn't really have access to good elemental reaction apart from swirling for extra bits of damage, so generally most of the time he will be relying on his raw damage as well as some of your sub DPS character support for extra damage as well. And so that generally would be the most important point you want to keep in mind in terms of Wanderer's gameplay, and I hope that did refresh your mind a bit in terms of that. Now next up, we'll be looking in terms of Wanderer's Constellations, because some of you might already have pulled for him and is actually wondering about how good his constellation would be right now. So in terms of his C1, what it does is that it basically increases his attack speed and it boosts the damage dealt by his Ascension passive. So generally, I'd say this is gonna be a decent constellation to have, especially when it as C1. It also gives him access to a bit of attack speed increase, so as you may have seen some of the showcase out there have been playstyle where it increases his attack speed to a lot and he just spams insanely quick with his attack, and it's very fun to watch. So overall, generally this will be only increasing his damage and won't be touching in terms of his playstyle whatsoever. C2 guys basically provides a 200% burst damage bonus as long as you use Wanderer's Burst after your E skills have been spent, which is generally whenever you have your C2, you want to cast your burst at the end of his E skill duration. Overall, still a pretty good damage increase for Wanderer. C4 will give you an extra random buff from his A1 on top of already the 2 extra you've already got. So now you're basically going to be having a 75% buff of all of his A1 passive, and I would say that is a decent increase for him. Of course, again, the cryo buff and the pyro one would be the ones you want most of the time, but generally having 3 out of 4 is already very good on him. And Wanderer C6 also increased his damage power by a lot, because now normal attack can fire additional arcs of anemo energy that deals extra 40% of Wanderer's regular normal attack, and this also extends his wind favor states or his E skills guys. Therefore, he will be able to stay in his E skill longer and resulting in you doing more damage. So overall, I would say that Wanderer's Constellation would be you boosting his damage power apart from C1, where it does give you a bit of attack speed increase, which I feel is the most different here. So generally, whenever you're investing into Wanderer's Constellations, it will be mostly about you caring how much damage he's currently doing and not regarding in terms of his playstyle. And so overall, now that you've got most of the information regarding Wanderers down, it's time I'll be giving you my personal opinion in terms of whether or not Wanderer is still a worth it character or not. And I would say guys, for me personally, I do really enjoy playing him, and since he is a hyper carry, it's a lot of competition right now in terms of other hyper carries character. So in generally speaking, it will be much down to your preference rather than in terms of the meta, because of course if we honestly consider the meta here, Wanderer wouldn't really be the top tier of the hyper carries, because especially at C0 there is a lot of other better hyper carries than him. Overall, if you do enjoy a lot in terms of his playstyle like I do, then he is still a very much unique character for you to pull, and I can guarantee you that you'll be having a pretty fun time with him, apart from most of the time that you get knocked back and get interrupted between his combo without having a shield on. And so at this point in time, I would already feel that you've already decided to whether or not to pull for Wanderer now. However, for those of you who are still planning to pull for him, here's a usual question that I see has been asked a lot, is that should I be going for Wanderer's Constellation or should I be going for his weapon? Which is a very good question. However guys, this might surprise you, but generally if you want to invest the best into Wanderer, then the biggest upgrade would be actually you trying to get a C6 Farazan first on top of everything else you want to consider. Now of course this might be generally hard because you know getting a C6 4-star character usually can be tough, but if you are investing into Wanderers anyway, then I believe you do have some extra gems for that. Now here's the reason why C6 Farazan is so important, is that Farazan currently is the only Anemo buffer that does the job for Anemo hyper carries. She have access to Anemo resistant shred and a lot of different unique and variety effects to support Anemo DPS character, and she also have access to a bit of crowd control, which can be really nice. However, she is still reliant on her C6, which not only offers her a 40% extra crit damage buff for Anemo characters, but the main thing is gonna be her ER requirement, guys, because pre-C6 Farazan energy requirement is just, oh my god, so bad. I would say it's really hard to level her out in terms of building her. So of course, generally speaking, you can try to make pre-C6 Farazan work, however it's just really hard for you to make the most out of her. Her C2 would just improve your rotation problem, C4 would of course lower her energy requirement, and C6 is of course can be one of the most impactful constellation in Genshin Impact. But again guys, as I may have said, even though C6 Farazan we've been saying is a very important character for him, it doesn't mean that you have to pull for a C6 Farazan. You can make just a C0 Farazan work as much as you can, because once again, there's not a must pull character in Genshin Impact, and you can enjoy it with just about any of the character to your likings. And so guys, if you were to be able to invest, again I would recommend you that would be a C6 Farazan, and then afterward that would be an R1 Bell Catalyst of him. Of course it's not the Bell, but you know, I'll just call it the Bell Catalyst, but generally his weapon would also be good. And then after that you want to invest into Constellation, that would be your next considerations. So those would be, guys, my thoughts on Wanderers in the current meta. Of course, if you do have any questions, just leave it down in the comment section, and I or some of the other lovely Genshin Impact player out there will get to you. Now guys, I didn't really discuss much regarding Wanderers teams in this video, but if you are curious about it, I have a very in-depth video about that and you can check it out here right now. Again guys, I really appreciate you guys sticking with me till this part of the video, and if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. It is a free way to support me, and there will be a lot of giveaway for you to win too, so everyone wins. Really appreciate you guys sticking with me till this part of the video, and with that I wish you a super day, and I will catch you on my next video.